Hi Mel.
Good morning, Wendy.
So, what's our subject today?
It's my favorite one. Anger's probably my second favorite, but shame is my first favorite topic because I think it's insidious. We don't always recognize it. It's obviously often revolutionary when I talk to clients and say, what is this feeling that is overwhelming, bringing tears, or snapping you into defensiveness? And I think often it is shame. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and it is one of those that we don't recognize or we feel bad about. We feel so guilty that we feel that shame, or there is we feel shamed by others
Yeah.
when it's their shame. I think that's that I notice that quite a lot. I feel ashamed because I let my parents down. I feel ashamed that I let that person abuse me. I feel ashamed that I didn't stop that person from sexually abusing me.
Yeah, we blame ourselves for what we could not do, and we've internalized that through our childhood. And
Yeah,
often we have been left by adults feeling not good enough, not measuring up, too
yeah,
much, not enough.
yeah,
They are the I'm too much and I am not enough are the paradoxes and the struggles of that are universal with humans.
mm,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And actually, if when people, you may have a very obvious trauma history, but actually, emotionally absent parenting there is often a lot of shame. Shame is a disconnection from my adult, um, that there's nobody there, it's whether we're silenced, whether we're told off, whether we're shouted at, it's all painful disconnection and
mm.
no safe adult. Yeah.
Yeah, and there is nothing worse than feeling, whether it's right or not, whether it's our fault and being shamed by somebody else.
Yeah. And actually when we've grown up with shame, the what we tend to do is we take responsibility for things that aren't ours. Yeah. Everything is our fault. Have I upset you? What have I done?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We automatically go to ourselves rather than actually, maybe somebody goes quiet on us and we're like, what have we done? Have I upset you? And actually maybe they've withdrawn because they're not having a good time and it's actually not about you. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know I've talked about my childhood before, I've shared it before, but this is how I felt shame. One of the ways I felt shame, well, it was this kind of story that I believed of myself was, well, when my parents are with their friends, they're very different. They're happy. They're communicative. They seem there's a, they connect with each other. And what was even worse was that they actually spent more time and seemed to enjoy their children more than they did me.
Yeah.
And so I would rack my brain as to, well, what have I done? What is it? Well, if they spend more time with their children, if their friends' children, and they're praising them and saying how wonderful they are, it must be me.
Yeah.
So I felt ashamed that I wasn't living up to being good enough.
Yeah. I don't matter. I'm not good
Mm,
enough. There's something wrong with me.
yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
resonates for me in my childhood. I was often told I was too much. I was too noisy. Get out my sight. I don't want to see you. Stop attention seeking. Nobody likes attention seeker. And actually, I was here as a child, having, wanting to be with my adults. I was a It's interesting because I've come full circle. I was a curious child. I picked open a stuffed toy to see what was inside of him, and he was then taken off me. There was no ounce of curiosity for why I'd done that. I was just naughty, destructive child. The toy was sewn back up and given to a sibling. Um, But yeah, I wanted to know what was inside of him, the curiosity. But it was just viewed as, you're ungrateful, you've destroyed this toy, all these projections onto a small child that just wants to know
Mm.
what's inside the monkey. But actually, it's expensive, you've ruined it. I also threw a pram down the stairs to see if it would bounce. Again, the same thing happened. I was hit and sent to bed. But actually, and it's taken this working through shame
Mm.
to and I find myself here as a therapist, and my superpower is curiosity. And so actually going, that curiosity in us is shut down with shame. We're not innovative, we're not curious, we're not creative because we're too terrified of getting it wrong and being in trouble. Shame stops us exploring, and it also stops us from playing. I know so many people who won't try something because I'm not going to be good at it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting how the effects were so different on each of us because
Yeah,
for you, you you would try new things even if you were punished. Me, I wouldn't even try them. I had to get it right. It had to be exactly right. And still that follows me even now at times.
yeah.
But for you, that curiosity was still there. I was too
It it
scared to
it
go in
it
that.
was only there for a little while, Wendy. I
Yeah.
don't remember the ages of any of this stuff because that's how trauma works. It's
No.
fragmented, but actually there are great big years and that I don't remember. So actually I didn't stay curious. I actually shut down, and I think I was actually quite disassociated in
Yeah.
my childhood. So no, I didn't stay the rebel. I shut down. And
No, and I
actually
guess
it's
it was
in
a view.
later life that I've
Yeah,
become
but
the
that's
rebel.
what I'm saying. That's where it's come out. It was still there. Whereas
It
the
was still there, but it was shut down for such a long
yes,
time because I was just terrified.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas me, it left me with I've still got to try and get it right, and I
yeah,
can't try new things. It will
yeah,
take a lot of courage from me. So it's interesting how the impact
yeah.
and how we as personalities deal with that shame.
Yeah, how we internalize it. I job hopped so much, and when I worked at places, it was never good enough. I felt never good enough, and
Yeah,
I've been sacked, I've left places, I been made redundant, and there was this sense of never being good enough. And actually, looking back, I always had a standard that was higher. I didn't like the sloppiness. And I left the prison service. I left the school. I've left voluntary sector because actually I realize now that it wasn't never not good enough. It was actually I was too good for these places, and the passion and the wanting to do it differently was never honored in any. I couldn't make the changes. I couldn't be the authentic me that I needed to be. There was
yeah,
too much red tape, too much stifling, too much anxiety, and it's no surprise that I work on my own. Yeah. Yeah, until recently. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think it is so interesting how we respond and how we react and the effect that shame has on us and what is shame? What does shame mean? I think
Yeah.
that's yeah, because a lot of people they find it hard to even name it because they
Yeah.
don't. It comes out it's my fault
They
or
don't
I
name it, but you will see it in operation. I remember working with a mum and a teenager many years ago, and the teenager came down the stairs and she was going out, and her mum says, "Are you going out like that?" And a teenager blew up. Yeah. And she blew up. And when we were unpicking what had happened, um, her mom had said, "Are you going out like that?" And actually, what her mom wanted, I said to her, "I'm curious about what you wanted to say, what you were going to say next." And she was going to say, "Because it's really cold. Do you not want to take a coat?" But actually what the teenager it hit this teenager's shame buttons, and she felt criticized. She thought she was being criticized, and she was that her skirt was too short, and so it hit her. She felt the shame and blown up in defense. and hadn't been able to hear what was coming next. Yeah, yeah. So shame, if we're feeling, we may say something to someone, and because they have a lot of that, they've been shamed a lot, they've been criticized, um, then I feel criticized. I feel the pain of not being good enough right now, so I blow up, yeah, or I snapshot. I don't want to talk about it. I'm off. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's interesting because I had a client who I always ask clients at the end, would you like to book another session? I'll be booking another session. When are you free? The language can change.
yeah,
You know, it it there's no rhyme or reason, but it will be. I will ask different questions at different times. And this particular client booked a session, but then, oh, they said, well, or do you feel that I shouldn't come back? And I said, well, it's your choice. What do you want to do? But then they booked a session and then cancelled it without any kind of explanation. So I contacted them and I said, I'm curious because we worked together for a long time. Well, I felt that um, when you asked that I shouldn't come, that question, I shouldn't come back. And it was, hold on a minute, where's this come from? But it's feeling, it's her life story, it's their life story, it's what they believe. If you're saying that, and I'd asked that question, I must have done over the time we've worked together, but it was that sense of, well, it must be me. I must have done something wrong. You don't want to see me again.
yeah. I think it's so inherent in relationships that trust that you want me, that I can feel safe and wanted. I can work with clients for years sometimes, and that how we can translate the tiniest things into
Yes.
um uh uh or jump into conclusions, or hearing something that hasn't been said from our own narrative of what's happened to us. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think there's so many ways we shame people without even realizing it, and blame people for what they can't yet do. I think, where it doesn't matter what sector you're in, it's blame and shame based. Yeah.
Mm,
And often punitive. We don't live in a world that is very forgiving of mistakes. We're not. It's one of the aspects of Brené Brown's Braving Trust is to be generous with our assumptions that people are trying their best, and that is so damn hard to do when you're in a place of pain, whether somebody's hurt you, upset you, that they didn't, you said this before, he's making me do, he is purposely trying to cause you pain or suffering. Actually, they're probably not aware, and actually they didn't set out to, who. I remember working with a little boy actually, and he said, my mom cooks this disgusting dinner, and I said, do you think she sits there and goes, I'm gonna see what the most disgusting food I can put in this pot for my boy tonight for dinner? And then he looked at her and he was like, no, actually, no. Yeah, so the stories we make up is that somebody's doing something to us intentionally because we've been hurt or they've missed us in some way. Yeah, yeah,
And then I'm going to go back to some of the original wounds. Like I know we talked before we started recording, because one of the things I work with is childhood sexual abuse or survivors of childhood.
yeah,
And so many times they were led to believe it was their fault,
yeah,
that it was they had asked for it, they'd agreed to it, they were enjoying it, and physiologically their body would have
yeah,
responded, let's face that.
yeah,
But there is the shame that, well, why did I let them do it? Why didn't I own up? Why didn't I tell anyone? And they, even when they admit it to anybody, they have that courage, they will be asked those questions. And I think, well,
yeah,
you know what? You haven't got a clue. You haven't got the faintest idea what it's like to be that child and one, be put in that position, and then how can I tell anyone? Because I feel so shamed to
Shame lives in
allow
silence, and even the person who was there being abused blames themselves and can't acknowledge their own terror,
mm,
and all of whether it's not being able to fight back, not being able to stop it. And when we get, if someone is brave enough to disclose abuse, it ricochets. It's like setting a bomb off in a family, so we can get people, you know. It's interesting. I think it might have been yourself who actually, was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. Was like, why am I going into so much detail about this story and telling you every little tiny bit of it? Why haven't I shortened it? And actually, that not being believed is
yeah,
so inherent in
yeah,
any form of abuse or not good enough parenting. But
yeah,
we over explain because we're not used to being heard.
yeah,
We don't expect to be believed,
yeah,
and so we overcompensate for that
yeah.
in the telling of stories. And yeah, and I hear it so often in my when I'm listening to people's stories and working with them, that I'm stupid because I should have done X, Y, and Z, and we're looking back with hindsight and we look back critically. But actually, whatever you did at the time, you did to survive, and surviving is messy. It's fucked up. It you may not be proud, and there may be shame around that. And
Mm,
inviting people to forgive their younger self, and that younger self may be yesterday. Yeah, it may be
yeah,
yesterday. It doesn't,
yeah,
if I look at what I've done to cope, yeah, it's not proud, and it's not pretty, but that's have to be able to look at that through the lens of coping, and with self-compassion, that actually, did it keep you alive? Yeah, let's go, through more trauma for me. I've had a real upgrade and deep knowing that, yeah, that kept me alive. Yeah, I'm still here because of it. And so we go, this is, we could do another one about self-care and privilege. We often bang on about self-care and privilege from a place of wellness and safety. But
mm.
actually, sometimes there isn't wellness and there isn't safety, and you're doing really odd things to other people. And so the shame around you're not self-caring, or the shame if you haven't taken a day off, shame is littered through most of the choices we make. Yeah,
Yeah, and going back to the work situation, because when you think about it, companies will, and same in schools, but people are recognized and rewarded the harder they try. Even so, where does that leave the person who has a different skill set? Where does it leave that you'll be rewarded? You're rewarded, but then the shame of not meeting your targets, the shame of not winning the race, the shame of not completing your working time, all of that is that's how organizations, a lot of them were built. Right. And how many, I'm sure you've questioned clients in the past. When was the last time you were told you were doing a good job? When
yeah,
you had an appraisal, what was said in there in that appraisal about what you had achieved and what you'd done well? Where
yeah,
was that? And yes, of course, we only remember the negatives because that's part of our survival system.
yeah,
But there is that um, but why do we do that? Why can't we just, I'm a great believer. I don't believe in eulogies. I think and memorials. What good are they to somebody who's died? I will tell someone, I think you're amazing. And not just off the top of my head. I think
yeah,
you're amazing because I
yeah,
think you've done really well because I
yeah,
think you look good in that because
yeah,
I think empty. Oh, you look good. Oh yeah, I think you're amazing. That's empty again. But
yeah,
why don't we do that more often and tell people, with clients, I will say, you're doing really well because
yeah,
reminding them how far they've come. With my kids and so my family, I will say, I think you're an amazing person, not because you've achieved so well in your career, which of course is good,
yeah.
but not just that, because you're an amazing person.
Yeah, I'm able to tolerate amazing, and you remind me of it often, and I can own that. But amazing is a big thing for somebody with a lot of shame to take on board.
Yes,
So
yes,
actually, uh, having the kind of the gift at the size that we can accept is so important. So
yeah,
you're
that's a
right.
good point.
I think it's about noticing, rather than telling people they're amazing all the time. And again, I'm aware as I tell you, you'll be like, you know, it has our shame buttons of, oh, I've got this wrong. And so when we offer an
No,
upgrade,
that's okay.
yeah,
I could take that on board, and now I
exactly.
know.
But I'm aware that as we offer new information, we often have to scoop in and like, because some people will go, oh my God, I've got it all wrong. And
No,
actually,
no,
no,
you've given me a bit more information, and that's
there's a new
useful.
knowing. And
Yeah.
when we know better, we can do better. But we do have to manage the shame of, you didn't know before, you
No,
do now. Yeah.
yeah,
And so it is, I think, a gentle noticing of how hard someone is working. And so, yeah, we only ever reward achievement, not effort. And so actually, how hard am I working? Well, sometimes getting out, if you're battling through depression or anxiety, the thermometer needs to change. Not that you nailed the day, but you got out of bed and you brushed your
yeah,
teeth.
yeah.
And so we have to keep moving the thermometer for the conditions of our lives. And actually, what helps with shame, it is self-compassion. It is being able to bounce back. I have a chronic, had some new shattering, so chronic sense of shame of being too much. But actually, I'm also, when I'm more regulated and I'm not in PTSD triggers, I am able to bounce back when I'm up in my prefrontal cortex. I'm able to bounce back to self-compassion that, no, this is hard. It's, you're living through your unimaginables and re-experiencing some old stuff too. And
Mm.
so actually, when we can add the lens of the practice of self-compassion in, then we start to ease the tightness, the grip that shame has on us. And actually, it's not about getting rid of it, it's about being able to tolerate it. I like to do, when I'm working with clients, I'll use this leaflet. When I'm working with clients, I often say what we tend to do is when we've got something wrong, we don't do this. Oh, I made a mistake, and it's this part. It's this much. Yeah. I made a mistake. I'm still a fabulous person. I forgot to send something. I forgot to do something. We're human. Yeah. We tend to do this.
Yes.
Everything we tend to, that one action, that one thing, because we haven't built a good sense of self and our intersubjectivity, we've had so much criticism, we've soaked up all this shame and shit stuff. When we get a knock, we fall right over,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
actually there's not enough, we don't know who we are enough to be able to go, actually, I made a mistake, I'm human, I got it, I'm sorry, I forgot, and I can put it right. Yeah. So what we get is people, when they're challenged, and how we challenge them also. If you challenge really gently and compassionately, invite somebody in, that's very different from you never, you never, you never. Yeah.
yes. And we hear that so often with
Yeah.
relationships, with couples
Yeah.
that come to us, don't we? You never.
Yeah.
You-
Yeah, so building that sense of compassion for ourselves and knowing ourselves. Like if I told you a pink elephant, you'd be like, yeah, very funny. I'm not a pink elephant. You absolutely know you're not a pink elephant. That comment is not going to bother you. If I said to you, you're a bit stupid, well, if you have any doubts about yourself, your intelligence, I know you're not, but but if you have doubts, then you take on board other people's projections, or other people's kind of comments, as you shrink. Shame has us shrinking and like contracting and going, I'm sorry, and take it, running off. Or
Mm,
it can have us puffing up in anger and defending ourselves. Brene's work, as you know, I love, she's the shame guru. is that we don't puff up, we don't shrink, and we stay in our sacred place. And then as we know ourselves better, we're able to say, actually, no, I quite like swearing. If it offends you, you can go off and do something else, but I like swearing, and I'm going to stay a sweary person, and I'm going to own that and put a warning out. And if I'm not your person, that's okay. I F and Jeff a lot, and the more passionate I get, the more my impulse control goes, and I'm like, fuck, 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 fuck. Yeah. And so, yeah. And so the more we own who we are, and the more we're able to deal with the projections of other people. You're not here to be anybody else's version of yourself. Somebody bought me a mug once, and it said on it, you can't be everyone's cup of tea, otherwise you would be a mug. And so learning to be disliked, learning to be in trouble. Yeah. Actually, Brené Brown says groundbreaking is troublemaking. Yeah. And I've learned to be a maverick, to be a troublemaker, to say, oh, fuck off. And no, that's not okay. And to find a voice, and it can get you into trouble. My passion gets me into trouble. I can be fierce, and I can go, I don't fucking like that. And then I'm like, oh shit. And I have to, I might have another conversation with somebody and say, yeah, I might shame somebody else in my fierceness. And so we all will shame other people, but it's noticing what we're doing, how we're being experienced, that helps us to then backtrack. Yeah, I want to talk about PT. I know you talk about sexual abuse, but I want to talk about PTSD, because it's a living experience for me. Yeah. And when I'm working with clients who have extreme trauma, and they are often living, and we're seeing post-traumatic stress responses, that you're oversensitive, you can't be like this, and they are trauma triggers. And the more trauma we've had, the more our brain is working very differently from somebody who's had safer care. And so you can be in so much survival brain that you're firing, or you're saying things or doing things, because that brain works at 300 millionth of a second. And so you do something and you're like, oh shit, I've upset someone. Yeah. And so as we heal, we build new neural pathways up to the upstairs brain. And so we're less in our survival brain. So it takes time in order to be able to respond rather than react from a place of utter survival. And the shame that I've had people say to me, I'm just fucking crazy, Mel, and I hate myself. And I said, and I have to really, I hear the shame of not being able to do it. And actually, whether it's a foster kid or somebody who's been through a big trauma in their adult life, it's not always childhood, it can be adult trauma too. The shame of not coping, the shame of not managing, the shame of kicking off or shutting down or disassociating, then yeah, it's our body is doing something that we can't control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is that.
And there's this notion that you're supposed to be in control of your emotions, and that that nobody can make you feel anything. And I think it's just bullshit. It's what coaches trot out. Nobody can make you feel anything. I'm like, well, yeah, if you're really healed and you've had no trauma and you're completely in your thinking brain, and you have a really good self-esteem, then maybe you are bulletproof. But in my experience, if somebody puts a knife to your throat, you'd feel fucking terrified. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so actually we do feel things.
Of course we're going to feel it.
I
would argue slightly differently, in as much we feel it, but it depends on our level of being solid as how we react to it.
It depends how well your brain functions.
Yeah,
that's the neuroscience is, am I enough in my thinking brain, my upstairs brain, a year ago, what triggered me it would have taken a huge amount. Yeah. With a lot of shattering and struggling with complex PTSD. I am triggered way more easily, because what it does is it shortens your fuse, your emotional
Yeah,
capacity,
yeah,
and your resilience. And actually, when we talk about, in control of our emotions, when I say this to people, they just go, "Oh shit." If you've ever been on a diet and like, I'm not eating crisps again, or some harebrained, like, I'm going to drink 10 glasses of water a day, whatever your kind of next thing is that you want to do in order to improve your health or well-being.
yeah,
And that's the black and whiteness. I'm going to do this every day. I'm going to do it all the time, rather than setting realistic expectations. So you tell yourself, I'm not going to eat crisps anymore. And then 5 minutes later, you've got your nose in a bag of crisps. Why? Because the lower brain is hijacking
mm,
and you into a survival pattern. And that takes some time to work through and to have the neural pathways up to the upstairs thinking brain. So the shame is, I can't even, the guilt and shame cycle, whether it's around food, whether it's about finding our breaks for alcohol, whether it's going to the gym, we don't know ourselves well enough yet to know that actually saying I'm going to do this every day is pointless, because that's not how humans work.
no,
Yeah, there are some who will be arguing and sat here going, well, I can do the 30 days dry January. Well, that's great. You've got a huge amount of discipline, but the vast majority of people, yeah, I'm just laughing here. I met a friend, if he's watching this, he'll know. I met him on the 2nd of January, and he said, I'm doing dry January. And I was like, how's it going? And he said to me, well, it's great apart from yesterday. And I just was in hysterics at that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
um,
absolutely. And
yeah,
I want to go back, if I may, because you talked earlier about that other people will, what we hear, we
yeah,
will encourage that sense of shame. But I also want to add the other part of it is that if we feel, let me take the example of you're stupid.
yeah,
So when we hear that or feel it, our brain will then search the midbrain. It will go into the midbrain, the memory, and go, and then there was something else, and then there was something else. And do you remember you got that wrong? So it's actually feeding and giving us concrete evidence as to why we're so stupid.
yeah.
And we might start doing
This is called kitchen sinking, and
yes,
Esther calls it kitchen sink, Esther Brow,
yeah,
where I need to make my point, and because I need to make my point, and I'm not going to just stay on this topic. I'm going to go back through the archives of everything you've ever done wrong and throw
yeah.
that at you, which is
But I think
unhelpful.
yeah, I think in relationships that's how it happens. But I
Definitely.
can find myself if I'm feeling, for example, I'm feeling I'm not good enough or that people don't care about me, and I can find all the evidence in the world that nobody
Yeah,
likes me because,
yeah,
well, they haven't contacted me, they didn't bother, they
yeah,
cancelled an event. Oh, look at that! And you remember when nobody wanted to talk to you at school? You go
yeah.
back, well, my parents didn't love me, so it is me, and
Yeah, all this hurt and abandonment has us making up a shame narrative that
yes,
it's,
and I just
yeah,
wanted to
that
bring that one up
I'm not
because I think,
lovable.
yeah, and I just wanted to bring that up because it's not always external, it is internal, and
Yeah,
we build that evidence that we are rubbish, that we are stupid,
yeah. With the
we're
first draft
unlovable.
is a shame, but often a shame based I'm not good enough, rather than this is really hard.
Mm,
This is tough to survive. Um, I also think we don't need words sometimes. If I'm working with someone with trauma and I'm like, well, how do we fix it? We know it happens. How do we fix it? And actually, if you've got somebody who has had a lot of trauma, and they're really, it feels like anything I say is going to be difficult here, then actually we have to be really gentle with our words, but we can also offer people to use their bodies. So, if I'm feeling criticized or triggered or ashamed, I can just put my hand up. I don't have to say anything. I can just do that. And that is enough to let you know that you've hit something really painful. I don't even, because actually, interestingly, because of the neuroscience of when we're dysregulated, and we're panicked or we're feeling scared, we lose access to the Broca region, the speech region, and the Whitaker, which is responsible for your breathing pattern through speech. And so when I really need my voice to defend myself, I may not have it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or to
Yeah.
stop what is happening here. So actually, if I can find a way to just if I can let you know when I'm not triggered, if you just put your hand up, if
Mm.
you're feeling chained or frightened, or this feels too much in the moment, then I can put my hand up. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can just put my hand up and go, I'm not tolerating this conversation really well. And we may have to slow it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, we may have to slow it down. We may need to give people time to process, to go off and do something. And then this is the bit that doesn't happen. And I remember working with a client who was like, light bulb moment. He was like, she won't leave me alone. And I said to him, but do you ever go back? You know, you can't tolerate the conversation right now. I don't want to talk about it and I want to leave. But do you ever go back? And he was like, no. And I was like, then she can't settle down. And this goes back to attachments that we've talked about in earlier episodes. So I don't want to talk about it. I snap shut, I blow up. And actually to give people time to say, this is painful, this is difficult. And I had it in a session recently where she's like, I just feel like back off, but the other person is like panicked. And so yeah, it's painful, it's difficult to talk about. I might lose my voice. I need to leave to feel safe.
Mm.
Yeah, and I need to be able to come back. Yeah.
Mm.
I actually told somebody recently, if I dysregulate, I think if we once we know what we need, and this is shame again around mental health, anxiety. Um, if we can get beyond the shame, then we can say to somebody, I'm anxious, I might need to go outside.
Yeah.
I might need to sit near the door. I need to know where the toilets are. I don't want to drive. I'd be happier if you drove today. We don't ask for what we need
No,
because
but
we're
that
too
can feel,
ashamed.
yes, because that feels shameful when you can't
Yeah.
help. That means
I
that
have to admit I'm not perfect, and you know I'm in a
yeah,
really a really unpredictable body right now, and so my level of competency occasionally when I'm triggered, it goes to really nothing. And
yeah,
that's shame. I talked about this with somebody else who was living with PTSD, that, you know, you and the shame is not, it's not just PTSD. It might be if you've had a leg amputated, if you're divorced, if you've lost your job, if you've just had a kid and you've got postnatal depression. What you had before and what you have now can be so different that having to come to an acceptance of this is how I am for now. It doesn't mean that you will stay there. So I have to, you know, come to terms with a new level of functioning, that I can't do everything I did prior to the shattering. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And shame can creep in at any moment. Like I
yeah.
can be doing okay. And then my hands, I've got a dysregulation. I've been triggered. My hands are shaking. I can't get my key in the car door.
Yeah,
And then the shame, you know, you're fucking useless, Mel. You can't even get in your own damn car.
but it,
And then that ability to be able to go back to compassion that says, no, you've had a shitload of stuff go on,
yeah,
and this is a result of you know, I'm a therapist, so got a lot of theory to call upon that goes, no, um this is this breathe. If I've got enough thinking
yeah,
brain on, I can breathe. If I haven't, I might ring you or one of my other I call them ledge friends, where I can tolerate being vulnerable with and go, no, okay. Yeah. And sometimes we actually need that. There's this concept of over resilience, that you're supposed to just do it all on your own. And so shame has us withdrawing, going shutting down, trying to do it in a hyper. Shame creates hyper independence. I can't ask for support. I can't tolerate other people seeing me in this state. And so when we really need the support the most, we actually struggle to tolerate it the most. Yeah.
yeah. And I hear that at such a very deep level. It's really difficult.
Yeah,
I want to go maybe up a little bit in as much that, asking for help means we're weak.
yeah,
Asking for help means that we're not enough.
yeah,
Asking, even if it is, can you get that off the top shelf?
yeah,
Can you, can you give me a lift somewhere? Could you? I mean, even asking for help from us as therapists,
yeah.
that people feel that asking for help is weak. And I think,
Well, that's because we're told it is. Let's be
no, and
honest.
I'm
We're
going to
told
go
it is,
with
aren't we?
that,
I
that
saw a
goes
coach. I saw a coach
against,
once on a Facebook advert, and the first thing she said was, "Nobody's coming to save you. You've got to do it yourself." And I'm like, that is not the thing to hear when you're suicidal, you're in shit street, and you can't do it all yourself. And
no,
you're too lost, and we actually need other people. And so yeah, this it's a narrative of it feeds into that hyper independence, and there is a balance here because all the coaches are probably going, "Ooh, that just leaves you powerless and helpless." No, we're wired for connection, we're wired to be supported, we're not wired to do it all on our own. Yes, there is a responsibility that we have to take for our own well-being and push through and like make decisions. But actually, it's when we can give someone that pure acceptance for where they're at, they do start to take responsibility. They can manage things, tiny little stepping into's.
mhm,
Trauma work is really, really slow. Healing is slow, and it is bumpy. I often talk about square one thinking. We have a lot of square one thinking, which is a shame narrative. I don't know where the square one terminology comes from. I often wonder if, and I might have a Google later, go down a rabbit hole of learning.
yeah,
I often wonder if it's the snakes and ladders board. That I'm back at square one, and life is a little bit like the snakes and ladders board. You go up if you know the game Snakes and Ladders, a lot of people will. If you, I don't know if it's British and whether it's, but for anybody who doesn't know it, you count across the squares. You go up a snake, up a ladder, and you wind down a snake depending on the dice. And so actually, we don't think about relapse as part of recovery, that you're going to get it wrong a million times before it kind of gets bedded in. And so what we tend to do is we don't honor the work we've done and notice the work we've done. We don't acknowledge that. And so when we hit a speed bump, shame narrative is, I'm back at square one. I've made no progress. I'm
yeah,
shit. I'm rubbish. I'm used. Guilt and shame arrives. And so actually, when we offer people that actually you're not back at square one, you might have come down a snake, but you can shoot up a ladder too. And so actually, the progress we've made hasn't been undone, but in that moment it's so overwhelming
yeah,
that that's the thinking we have going on. It's shame. We drop, like I always say, if you're down here and you make some progress and shame arrives, then you drop down here. I'm like, I've had to go down on the screen because it's
yeah,
below zero. It's like -10. And then you have to work really hard just to get back to zero. Yeah. So you keep dropping down and you keep coming and you don't feel to make any progress. And
mm,
interestingly, self compassion, when we add self compassion in, when we stumble, if we can put self compassion in, and it is a hard practice, then what happens is when you don't keep dropping down to here. When you get self compassion, you drop a little bit, and then you carry on. And
yeah,
so, and Kirsten Neff, I can't remember if it's Kirsten or Kristen Neff. I always get it mixed up. My dyslexic me, Kristen or Kirsten Neff. She's a compassion guru,
mm,
and we all think that tough love, beating ourselves up, gets us further. But the research suggests is when we take all the pressure off ourselves, we give ourselves space, when we can be compassionate, then that takes us much further. Yeah,
yeah. Of course. I mean, we all thrive much better on even take children. They thrive better on praise than they do on being reprimanded. That,
Yeah.
makes sense.
And
And
it's
we're
not
all
even
praised.
praise, it's noticing the
Yeah.
effort.
And
Yeah.
I'm just actually taking it
Yeah,
back to that stage then.
definitely. And
Yeah.
I think it's really important to distinguish that actually what parents do who've had a trauma history is they overpraise their children and the children's
Yeah.
not taking it in. So it's this
No.
gentle noticing
Yeah.
that
And
says, and
as I was
asking a
saying it,
child,
yeah.
Did you feel you worked hard on that? Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
as I
and
said,
an
praise,
adult,
I think you're right. It's
what did you
noticing. Yeah.
noticing the hard work that you and feeding that, mirroring that back to
Yeah.
someone? Because and shame narrative is so big that I'm rubbish, I'm useless, and they may have done a lot that day that they haven't acknowledged or noticed. Yeah, so for me noticing is so much more
Noticing.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. It's the
Yeah.
noticing is much more. Yeah. Praise. I
And that's
would
because
be
we
right
bat
on
out
noticing.
compliments. People, I've got a video on this somewhere else, but we bat out compliments because what it does is as you get a compliment in, if you don't have great self-esteem, compliments can be hard to accept. So what we do is it's like I always use the metaphor, it's like a cricket ball back, a hard cricket ball coming at you. It's coming at you. It disrupts our story. It makes us feel uncomfortable. So what we do is we get the cricket back and we hit it for six. It's very British, sorry, cricket analogy, but we hit it out. We hit it away. We bat it away because it's disrupting the story I have about myself. And so actually, interestingly, how do we accept the good stuff in? Is we have to feel that uncomfortableness in our body. We
Mm.
can say thank you for noticing. What we might tend to do is try and toss it. Somebody said to me once, I like your dress. And I was really tempted to say, oh, it's old.
Yeah.
I've had it years. And actually actually it's all about opposite actions. Growth is all in the opposite actions, which are really uncomfortable. And actually what I was able to say, thank you. It's actually a favorite of mine. And thank you for noticing, letting it in. Yeah. And so compliments are a little bit like new shoes. They're uncomfortable. It takes time and practice to get comfortable with accepting the good stuff in that floats us up. Yeah. So we have to start gently.
Yeah.
I often also give people, let's use this book. So I'll say to me, imagine this is a compliment. Yeah, I'm giving it to you. And they take it. And then I say, now give it me back, and they give me the gift and I toss it across the room and they're like, I said, it doesn't feel too good when someone tosses your gift away. Yeah.
I use the same analogy.
Yeah. So, whether it's a physical gift or a compliment, it's given with love and care. That person chose to give it you, but trust, all of this is grounded in trust. And actually, I struggle to trust that what you're saying is true. I'm struggling to trust your version of you. I often say to clients that are really struggling, I have a different view of you than you will have of yourself. This is my view of you. Yeah.
Mm.
And I get that will be hard for you to accept or tolerate. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always an interesting one, isn't it? When we
How
say,
it feels in our body. Can we
my view,
tolerate it?
yeah,
Yeah.
my view of you is very different when I offer that. How
Yeah.
does that feel? And they
Yeah.
will stop and it's, well, no, it can't be me, or this is hard, or I don't
Yeah.
believe it, or that sometimes they just sit in complete silence.
So silence can be shock. I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to do with it. And there's something going on it's all about what's going on in our bodies. Breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it ups, interestingly, Kirsten, there, I often do this automatically without realizing, put your hand on your heart center and yeah, a big exhale. Yeah. We often, we're so in our heads and we're talking and we don't think about what is this doing in our bodies. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I like to ask people to try the words on sometimes. Yeah. Try the words on. Are you able to say them out loud? Yeah. Yeah. Just like clothes. Can we try them on? See how they feel, how they
Mm.
fit? Yeah.
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 Gosh, that's been quite a diverse exploration of shame, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
It's
yeah, I
into
think
so many other
we've chipped the
things.
iceberg. It's huge. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
But I think it is just noticing that shame and where the shame belongs. Is it our shame? Is it somebody else's shame? Is it,
yeah.
should, like you say, trying it on, is it really ours? Or do we discard it and say, actually, no, that doesn't fit for me?
Yeah, and how much we
A lot.
don't do things because of shame. People
Yeah,
don't dance because they don't want to look stupid. They don't move their bodies. They never enjoy the experience of twirling around like a fairy in a ballerina, or bouncing up and down like a tigger at a rock band. They don't experience this because I don't want to look stupid. Shame is stopping us dancing, stopping us painting, stopping us trying that musical instrument. I mean, I had a moment when Polly was barking earlier and you're talking. I'm like, oh shit, Polly's barking. I hit the mute button so that to take her out, but I could feel that, like, oh God, we're recording, and but Polly's kicking off. But yeah, actually, if she'd have carried on, I'd have picked her up and brought her on the call. And everybody's like, if you've not seen any, they're all wondering who Polly is now. I might grab her. So yeah, it's at the minute something goes wrong, we shame can arrive. Yeah, I don't take my kids anywhere because they play up and I'm judged by other parents.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't take my dogs anywhere because people go, oh, well, it's you, you're a shitty owner, it's your fault. Not, no, actually, Polly has PTSD as well. She has been abused and she doesn't have a lot of thinking brain. She panics.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's, it's following us around. And when we notice it, we can start to attend to it. Yeah. Here she is.
Yeah. It just served her, poor thing.
Here she is. This is Pol's, Polly. Yeah. So yeah, that's probably, where are we for time? Where we're, it's almost
Yeah,
an hour. That's probably a lot for people to
it is
digest,
probably. I
isn't
think
it?
there is, because there's so many different levels and so many different things that feed into it. So I think there's a lot for
Yeah,
people to digest and think about. But let's assure people that if they want to talk more, they can always find us, either of us, whoever they
yeah.
feel that.
If you, yeah, if you want to contact us, that's fine. And if you
Yeah,
don't, but you want some resources, Brené Brown's work on shame, her books on embracing vulnerability, the gifts of imperfections, Kirsten Neff's work on self-compassion, they are good places to start. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Shall
brilliant.
we call it time for today there?
We'll call it time then.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you for listening. If you've managed, yeah, to tune in. I don't know if anybody's ever. I see little views, but no one's commented yet. And actually, I haven't been that great at sharing them. So, yeah, if you are watching, we'd love to know what you think. Yeah,
Yes, do. And if there's anything that you'd like to hear more about, or
yeah. We're happy to have suggestions for topics, to
mm,
further explore and hopefully help. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So lovely to chat with you again today, Mel. And we'll say goodbye now, and goodbye to the listeners or the watchers. So take
Thank
care
you.
now.
Speak
Bye.
speak soon. Bye.